I'm Haley Rhodes, 33. 8 months ago, just after I lost my job, my parents changed the locks on their 5-bedroom house and told me I couldn't stay there even for one more night. Now, after scraping together every ounce of energy I had left to rebuild my life and finally buying my own place, they're demanding I give it up for my brother. If you were in my shoes at 33, would you choose peace for yourself or approval from your family? Let me know what you think below. I'd worked my whole adult life to become the sort of daughter any parent would be proud of. My parents, Linda and Robert, raised us in Mount Lebanon, a leafy suburb on the edge of Pittsburgh where driveways were wide and expectations wider. My older brother, Dylan, always the golden child, had a room to himself and trophies lining his shelves. I shared a bedroom with my sister, Jessica, who learned early that blending in meant fewer headaches. When I landed my first big job as a staff accountant downtown, Mom framed my offer letter, hung it in the hallway, and made a show of pride to anyone who came by. Still, she kept the best praise for Dylan. His grades, his Little League games, his college acceptance, all broadcast like the nightly news. The pattern was always there. If Dylan forgot to rake the yard, Dad laughed it off. If I came home 5 minutes late, Mom's face hardened as she rattled off everything she'd done for me. By the time I hit my 30s, I had carved out my own version of stability, a steady role as senior accountant at Henderson and Levine LLP, a small but sunlit apartment, and a respectable savings account. But then in the spring of last year, my department was cut. The partners announced it on a Wednesday. By Friday, I was packing up my desk one box at a time, 33 and jobless. I called my parents that night, holding my breath as I told them I'd lost my job. Mom's voice was chilly but polite. Well, you're resourceful, Haley. Maybe this is the push you needed. Dad's tone was even colder. You're not a child. Dylan's kids are here every weekend. We don't have the space. There was a spare bedroom, but it was Dylan's office for when he worked remotely. Jessica's room had become a home gym, though no one used it. Can't you just find a sublet for a few weeks, Mom asked. I can, but it's sudden. My lease is up in 2 weeks. I thought, I'm sorry, honey. It's just not the right time, she cut in. For as long as I can remember, family in our house meant Dylan first. I wasn't angry, not at first. I packed up what I could fit in my old Honda, sorted through boxes of work clothes, accounting books, and a battered suitcase I'd taken to college. My last night in my apartment, I stared at the city, lights out the window, and told myself this was temporary. Surely I'd find work soon. But my phone stayed silent. The days trickled by. When my lease ended, I asked my parents again, this time in person. I stood in their tidy kitchen, smelling the pot roast Mom made for Dylan's kids. Can't you make room for me? Just a month or two, Mom shook her head. It's not fair to disrupt everyone. Dylan's kids need their space. Dad barely looked up from his phone. You're smart. You'll figure it out. So I drove to a Giant Eagle parking lot, my car, now my only shelter. I folded down the back seats, layered old sweatshirts over myself, and tried to sleep. The hum of passing cars felt both dangerous and strangely reassuring. That first night, I replayed my mom's words, you'll figure it out. It echoed in the dark. Every morning, I'd slip into the LA Fitness off McKnight Road, scan in as if for a workout and shower before heading out to chase job leads. My phone buzzed sometimes, Jessica asking if I'd seen her son's latest soccer trophy, or Dad forwarding me a job posting with the comment, looks easy enough. Never, how are you holding up or do you need anything? Still, part of me hoped. They're just giving me tough love, I told myself. When I find something, it'll all make sense. But even as I tried to believe it, the truth crept in with the cold at night. I was on my own. Summer faded into fall in Pittsburgh, and I found myself learning the rhythms of survival. Every morning, I'd wake before sunrise, shivering in the back seat of my Honda, careful not to draw attention from the Giant Eagle security patrol. The windows fogged with my breath, a thin film of condensation obscuring the world outside. I'd grab my gym bag, slip into the LA Fitness on McKnight Road, and try to act like any other member. The front desk worker barely glanced at me anymore. I became an expert at quick showers and stealthy wardrobe changes. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, hair damp, eyes tired, trying to pass for normal. By day, I hustled for temp work, pouring coffee in a noisy cafe, scanning endless columns of data in the back room of a logistics company, manning the register at a strip mall retail store. The paychecks were small, barely enough for gas and the cheapest groceries, but I stretched every dollar eating discount soup in my car and keeping snacks hidden in the glove box. My old savings dwindled. $10,000 looked like a fortune from here, but in reality, it vanished fast. Jessica texted occasionally, usually to share news about her son's soccer games or Kevin's latest work trip. Maybe you should take a class online, she'd write, or, Dylan would never let himself fall this far. I stopped replying after a while. Her words felt less like support and more like gentle reminders of the pecking order. Dylan, for his part, was silent. Mom and Dad reached out only to send job listings, accounting assistant, data entry, even a night manager role at a car wash on the South Side. Anything is better than nothing, Mom's message read. When I suggested I could help around the house in exchange for a bed, she replied, "Not right now, Haley. It's not a good time." There were days when the loneliness felt physical, pressing down on my chest until I could hardly breathe. I'd watch families stroll out of the supermarket together, children tugging on carts, parents laughing at private jokes. In the quiet of my car, I'd remember the warmth of my old apartment, the pride I felt signing that lease the way sunlight once fell across my kitchen counter in the mornings. Those memories felt like someone else's life. At night, the cold crept in early. I layered sweatshirts and curled up, listening to the hum of cars and distant city sounds. Sometimes the engine wouldn't start right away in the morning and panic would rise in my throat. What if this old Honda gave out? I kept a jump starter in the trunk and a flashlight under the front seat just in case. But I learned little by little how to disappear, how to make the most of library Wi-Fi, how to freshen up in the public restroom at Target, how to blend in among the city's invisible residents. I sold off everything I didn't need, work shoes and old TV jewelry from high school, clinging to my laptop, and the suit I hoped to wear to my next real interview. One afternoon, as the leaves turned red and gold along the Monongahela, I ran into a former coworker at the cafe. She smiled, but her eyes flickered with something like pity. "Are you doing okay?" she asked. "You seem different." I forced a smile, just figuring things out. By the time the first frost set in, I'd grown skilled at hiding the truth. "I'm fine," I'd say, "just between things." I told myself that too, some nights shivering in the dark, clinging to the hope that this was only temporary. Deep down, though, I wondered how long I could really hold out. January in Pittsburgh is a kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. The city felt even harsher when you had no real home. I'd gotten used to the sounds of tires crunching on frozen pavement, the sharp ache in my hands as I tried to rub warmth into my fingers each morning before heading out to find more temp work. One morning, as I sat in the library nursing a cheap coffee and searching through another round of job listings, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Is this Haley Rhodes? Yes, speaking. My name is Mr. Peterson with Peterson & Associates. I'm reaching out regarding the estate of your grandmother, Eleanor Rhodes. It took me a moment to process. I hadn't even known she'd passed. No one in my family had called to tell me." He explained gently but efficiently that my grandmother's will had left me a sum $36,000 outright. "There's also a letter for you," he said. "Would you be able to come downtown to the office this week?" The words didn't feel real. I walked through the icy city in a daze, replaying the conversation over and over. That night in the car, I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, tears blurring my vision. After months of being invisible, of feeling like I didn't matter, someone had remembered me. Someone had believed I deserved something of my own. At the lawyer's office, Mr. Peterson handed me an envelope. Inside a check, more money than I'd seen in years, and a handwritten note from my grandmother. "Haley, I hope this helps you build something no one can take from you. Be strong. Love, Grandma Eleanor." I left the office clutching that letter as if it were a lifeline. With the check deposited, I added what was left of my own savings, barely $10,000 to the total. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine a future with real walls, a roof that was truly mine. I started searching online for small houses in neighborhoods I could afford. Most of them were old, a little rough around the edges, but to me, they looked like palaces. I shared the news with no one. Not Jessica, not my parents, not even Dylan. Part of me wanted to call and say, "I'm okay." I landed on my feet. But another part, the one that remembered every cold shoulder, every knot, right now, kept quiet. I told myself it was better that way. The process wasn't simple. Even with nearly $50,000 for a down payment, every real estate agent seemed skeptical when they heard my story. That's when Eric, an old friend from my college days, offered to help. He'd gone into real estate law and knew the ins and outs of local Pittsburgh deals. "Don't let anyone talk down to you," he told me, reviewing listings late into the evening, sharing advice over text. "This is your chance to start fresh." Within a month, I found a modest 2-bedroom house in Squirrel Hill. The paint was peeling, the appliances dated, but I could see the bones were good. It was quiet close to the park, a place where I could breathe again. On the day I signed the final paperwork, I held the keys in my hand for a long time. I texted Eric a picture and thanked him for believing in me when I barely believed in myself. He just replied, "Told you H." No one can take this from you now. Sitting alone on the floor of my new house that evening, the only furniture, a thrifted chair, and my suitcase, I reread Grandma Eleanor's letter. For the first time in nearly a year, hope felt real. My first week in the new house felt like walking on clouds. The space was small, but all mine, a battered 2-bedroom on a quiet street with paint flaking on the porch and old radiators that knocked in the night. Every imperfection felt like a promise that I belonged. I scrubbed floors, patched tiny holes in the walls, and hung faded curtains I'd bought at a thrift shop. With each chore, my confidence grew. The echo of my footsteps on bare floorboards was the sound of freedom. I decided to mark the occasion with a small housewarming dinner. It felt right after months in my car to invite my family for a meal cooked in my own kitchen. I sent out messages to Mom, Dad, Dylan, and Jessica. Would love to have you all for dinner this Sunday. Just us, nothing fancy. They arrived together, arms full of casserole dishes and paper grocery bags. My mother looked around, lips pursed. This is bigger than I pictured Haley. Dylan, always surveying, peeked into each room, trailing his 2 young kids behind him. "You could probably fit another bed in here," he commented, sizing up the spare room. Jessica eyed the living room, scanning for clues about how I'd managed all this. She asked, "Did you get help from someone? Or was this from the inheritance?" We gathered around the folding table I'd set up in the kitchen. The food was simple, pot roast green beans, store-bought rolls, but every bite tasted like a new chapter. Conversation was awkward, as if they were touring a stranger's home. Mom asked questions about the mortgage and if the neighbors seemed safe. Dad gave advice about keeping pipes from freezing. But beneath it all, I felt something shift. Dylan's wife wandered the halls, imagining where their kids' toys might go. My mother examined the locks on the back door, fingers lingering as if checking their sturdiness. Jessica complimented the layout, but suggested it would be more practical if I took on a roommate. No one said congratulations. Instead, there were suggestions, calculations, hints. "It's a lot of space for one person," Mom remarked. Dylan laughed. "Wouldn't it be funny if the kids had their own room here?" Jessica chimed in. "Maybe someday you'll want to move back in with Mom and Dad. You could always rent this out to family." I smiled, but each comment felt like a pebble tossed in my shoe, small, persistent, impossible to ignore. After dinner, as I cleared dishes, I noticed Mom by the kitchen counter, quietly inspecting the new house keys I'd left in a bowl. She said nothing, but I watched her slip one into her purse when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, after everyone left, the house felt different. The echoes now carried a nervous edge. I lay in bed replaying every word, every glance. I got up and checked the doors twice, triple-checked the windows, then took the extra set of keys and hid them deep in my dresser. The next morning, I ordered a set of security cameras and a new lock. I wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how much DNA we shared, turn my sanctuary into their territory. In the stillness, I realized I finally had a place of my own. But peace, I was learning, is something you have to fight to keep. March in Pittsburgh had a way of bleeding cold through every crack, and I felt it most when I realized that having a house didn't mean I was truly safe. The first week of settling in had been peaceful, almost blissful. But then the signs began. It started small. Dylan and his kids would show up under the guise of a weekend visit, wandering into the garage as if it were theirs. Jessica sent boxes marked temporary storage that she dropped in the basement without asking. Mom lingered in the kitchen, rearranging my potholders and glancing at the new appliances. Each intrusion felt calculated, a silent test of boundaries. I sat in my living room one morning, sipping coffee that had cooled too quickly, and counted how many times in just a week someone had entered my home without my permission. 3 times, maybe 4. Each time, my pulse quickened. My sanctuary was no longer fully mine. I made my first proactive move, replacing the locks. The locksmith arrived early on a Thursday, and I felt a small surge of triumph as the new keys clicked into place. The door would only open for me now. I kept one extra set hidden deep in my dresser just in case. Mom noticed immediately. That evening, her eyes lingered on the door longer than usual, and her smile was tight. "You changed the locks," she asked, voice a mixture of surprise and mild reproach. Yes, I said, evenly meeting her gaze. I like to know who has access to my home. She pursed her lips and said nothing further, but the tension was palpable. I knew the locks weren't enough. I needed evidence, something concrete, in case the boundary was tested again. I called Eric, my lawyer and oldest friend, explaining everything, the surprise visits, the temporary boxes, Mom handling my keys. Document everything he said calmly. Photos, timestamps, video footage. If they push, you'll have proof. So I did. I set up cameras in the entryways, tucked one discreetly in the living room corner, and began logging each incident meticulously. The first video showed Dylan lifting a blanket off the couch as if he owned it. Another captured Jessica carrying a box to the basement. Even Mom was caught rifling through the keys, her hand hesitating only when she saw the blinking red light on the camera. The next confrontation came sooner than I expected. Mom arrived on a Saturday pretending to drop off groceries. I caught her lingering near the cabinet. I kept the extra keys in. Mom, I said, placing the bag of carrots on the counter. I know what you're doing. Please respect my space. Her expression shifted surprise quickly, giving way to indignation. I'm just checking things, making sure the house is safe. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. It's my responsibility. You don't get to decide who enters. For the first time, she hesitated. Dylan and Jessica, following her lead, exchanged glances, but said nothing. It was a small victory, but significant. The line had been drawn. My house was my own, and I would not let anyone cross it. That evening, I sat on the hardwood floor, legs stretched out, staring at the glow of my new security monitors. The house was quiet again, but I could feel the lingering tension. The freedom I had fought for was mine, yet the awareness of potential intrusion remained. I had claimed a space, but the battle for boundaries had only just begun. Despite the cold and the quiet anxiety, a sense of empowerment settled in. I was reclaiming what had been denied to me for years, piece by piece. Each locked door, each camera feed, each documented moment strengthened the invisible walls around me, not just the physical walls of the house, but the metaphorical walls I had constructed for my life. And as the evening shadows lengthened across the floorboards, I realized that claiming space wasn't enough. Maintaining it required vigilance, courage, and unwavering resolve. For the first time, I felt that I could truly stand my ground. Early April had settled over Pittsburgh, and the air carried both the scent of thawing snow and a simmering tension. I had just returned from a late shift at Henderson and Levine, LLP exhausted but buoyed by the small routines I had built for myself. The peace of my new home was about to be tested. When I walked in, my living room was occupied. Not just Mom and Dad, but Dylan, Jessica, and even Dylan's wife, all seated with folders and papers spread across my small coffee table. A stack of neatly printed documents of family proposals stared up at me. I knew immediately what this was. Dylan greeted me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk about the house, he said casually, as if it were an everyday matter. I swallowed hard, forcing calm. Yes, let's hear it. Mom spoke first, her voice syrupy with false concern. Haley, we've thought this through. Dylan and his family need more space. This house, it's really ideal for them. I raised an eyebrow. And you think that entitles you to my home? Dad leaned forward, trying to soften the edges. We're not saying you can't live here, but perhaps this could be a practical arrangement. Less financial burden for you and Dylan's children would have rooms. Jessica has always chimed in with a gentle reprimand disguised as advice. You could be more generous, Haley. After all, it's family money from Grandma's estate. I felt the weight of it, guilt-tripping entitlement, all dressed in polite words. My stomach tightened, but I had anticipated this. I had the locks changed, the cameras, running the documentation in place. I wasn't here to negotiate. I was here to assert ownership. I appreciate your concern, I said slowly, making sure each word landed, but this is my home. Grandma left me funds, I added my own savings, and this is where I live. The house stays mine. Dylan's smile faltered slightly. We're just trying to help, he said, voice losing its casual tone. Mom leaned closer. Think of it as keeping the family together. You wouldn't want to disappoint Grandma's wishes, would you? I let out a quiet laugh. Grandma's wishes were clear. $36,000 from her estate, combined with my savings and hard work, bought this house. No one else has a claim. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Dad, sighing, tried a different tactic. It's just a suggestion. We think it's best for everyone. I crossed my arms firm. Suggestions are welcome, but boundaries are non-negotiable. You cannot enter my home without permission. You cannot take keys. You cannot pressure me. Eric's advice echoed in my mind. Document everything. I made a mental note to back up the security footage and keep detailed records of this meeting. Every glance, every subtle move, evidence of pressure or entitlement was now part of my archive. Dylan shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his usual tactics would not succeed. Jessica's voice softened, almost pleading, "It's not personal." I shook my head. "It's very personal. This is my life, my hard work, my choices. The decision is mine alone." Mom's eyes filled with restrained anger. Dad looked as though he might explode. Yet for the first time, the power dynamic had shifted, however slightly. I had drawn the line, and they had no legal or moral authority to cross it. That evening, I walked through my empty rooms, securing the doors and checking camera angles once more. The house was mine, but I knew the battle for respect had just begun. I was determined to hold my ground, no matter how persistent their attempts to reclaim control became. The sense of agency settled over me like a warm blanket. I had defended my space, I had taken a stand, and I would not back down. Mid-April had brought more than just early blooms to Pittsburgh. It brought a flood of messages that made my stomach twist. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from a family group chat. The thread had grown overnight from a casual check-in to a full-blown tribunal of 20 relatives, all weighing in on my selfishness. Jessica led the charge. "Haley, you're breaking Mom's heart. Dylan's kids are suffering because you refuse to compromise," she typed the words punctuated with emojis of crying faces. Others chimed in, some suggesting I consider renting the house to family, while a few cousins distant enough to feign neutrality offered backhanded remarks about the sacrifices Mom and Dad had made. I read the messages jaw tight. My hands shook slightly as I typed a single sentence back. "I've made my choice. This is my home, and I will protect it." I called Eric, immediately pacing my living room, the hum of the heater filling the silence between calls. "They've escalated it," I said. "Everyone is piling on, and it's relentless." Document everything he advised calmly. Take screenshots, back up your camera footage, and make a record of any verbal pressure. You'll need it if this goes further. So I did. Each ping, each notification became a time-stamped artifact of intrusion. Screenshots of the chat video clips of Dylan measuring rooms or leaving toys in the garage, Jessica placing her boxes, all carefully archived. Every small violation built the case I knew I might need. Despite the harassment, I forced myself to keep perspective. My voice remained steady when Mom called, crying over the phone, guilt-tripping me about family harmony and Dylan's needs. I listened, then replied with measured words. "I hear you, Mom. I understand your concern, but my answer does not change. The house is mine, and my decision stands." The group chat turned into a constant barrage. Notifications arrived at all hours, yet I learned to ignore them, responding only with short, factual statements. I reminded myself of the months I had spent in my car, of the nights spent shivering, of the times I had eaten cold soup from the glove compartment. The stakes had changed. Now I was the one with leverage and evidence. One evening, Dylan sent a message that chilled me. "We need to talk," with my lawyer. I didn't panic. I had anticipated this moment. I ensured all camera footage was saved to the cloud, every document was backed up, every text stored in chronological order. The tension inside me ebbed and flowed like the river near my street. Part of me ached for familial approval, for the warmth I had once taken for granted. But the other part, stronger tempered by months of struggle, recognized that validation had to come from action, not words. By the end of the week, the group chat had settled into a rhythm, constant chatter, punctuated by quiet moments of reflection from a few cousins who seemed to notice the one-sidedness of the accusations. I sat in my empty living room, the soft hum of my security system, a reassurance that my home was secure. My home, my rules, my boundaries finally clear and uncompromised. As night fell, I thought back to the early mornings in the car, the cold seeping into my bones, the meals eaten alone at the library. The stark contrast between those weeks and the current evening was almost surreal. I had moved from desperation to preparation, from invisibility to agency. Every notification, every message, every challenge only reinforced my resolve. And I realized something essential. No matter how persistent the pressure from family, no matter how relentless the psychological strain, I had built a fortress not just of doors and locks, but of evidence, boundaries, and conviction. For the first time in months, I felt empowered, ready to face whatever escalation awaited. The house was mine. The line was drawn. And this time, no one could cross it without consequences. Late April brought the first warmth of spring to Pittsburgh, and with it a family gathering that would mark the culmination of months of tension. My grandmother's 80th birthday party was held at a large restaurant in Squirrel Hill. Tables lined the dining room, voices murmured over shared memories, and the clinking of glasses punctuated conversations. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of my family's scrutiny concentrated in a single room. Mom, Dad, Dylan, Jessica, and their children arrived first, arms full of gifts and platters, moving through the space with practiced smiles. I entered shortly after, clutching a small tote containing the USB, with all the compiled evidence, camera clips, screenshots of group chats, video of unexpected visits, and copies of the proposal folder. My heartbeat matched the thrum of the restaurant's ambient music, a strange blend of nerves and anticipation. Dylan approached, trying to appear casual. "Haley," he said, voice light, "why don't you come sit with us for a moment?" His eyes flickered toward the children, then back at me. I nodded politely but ignored the invitation, setting my tote on the chair across the room. My mother noticed my hesitation, an edge of unease brushing her features. Jessica's eyebrows lifted in silent inquiry. As the party began, relatives mingled, exchanging pleasantries. The chatter soon turned to topics of homeownership and inheritance. One aunt mentioned the generosity of grandparents. Another cousin wondered aloud how Dylan's kids were adjusting to school. Every comment seemed calculated to make me feel small, to remind me that I was the one who had been left out, the one who had been dependent on everyone else. When the toasts began, I waited for the right moment. As glasses were raised, I gently placed the USB on the table and stood. "I have something to share," I said, voice steady, drawing eyes from across the room. "This evidence shows everything that has happened over the past months: visits without permission, attempts to pressure me into giving up my home, messages from family urging me to surrender the house." A silence fell. My mother's lips parted in disbelief. Dad's posture stiffened. Dylan froze mid-sip of water, the grin slipping from his face. Jessica's hand went to her mouth. The restaurant seemed to shrink around me. All attention was on the evidence in front of us, tangible proof that my assertions were not mere complaints or exaggerations. I calmly guided the family and select witnesses through each item, screenshots, time-stamped camera footage notes on the proposal folder. Each piece reinforced the narrative of pressure, entitlement, and invasion of privacy. Relatives murmured among themselves, some in shock, some in quiet support. A few cousins who had remained neutral now looked directly at Mom and Dad, the expressions on their faces betraying surprise and disapproval. Dylan attempted to interject, his voice rising slightly. "Haley, it's not like..." I raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "Please, I think the evidence speaks for itself." Throughout the presentation, I maintained control over my own emotions. The years of struggle, the nights spent in my car, the temp work, the shivering, the constant rejection fueled a quiet resolve. I wasn't lashing out. I was asserting boundaries, showing undeniable proof of ownership and rights. The room's energy shifted from expectation to realization. By the end of the demonstration, my family's authority had crumbled. Mom's eyes were moist, not with pride, but with recognition of the missteps. Dad's posture slumped, and Dylan's earlier confidence had evaporated. Jessica, though still polite, avoided direct eye contact. For the first time, I sensed the balance of power had shifted completely. I gathered my tote and placed it gently on the chair, my voice softening. I wanted everyone to understand the truth so that moving forward, my home and my life are respected. A few relatives came up to me after the presentation, offering quiet words of support and apology. Some nodded, acknowledging the months of unseen struggle I had endured. The warmth of validation was not loud, but it resonated deeply, filling a space I hadn't realized had been empty for so long. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside briefly, taking in the clear night sky. I unlocked the front door of my Squirrel Hill home, the locks secure, the cameras silently vigilant. I entered, closed the door behind me, and exhaled. Peace had been won, not with confrontation, shouting, or legal battles, but with preparation, patience, and quiet resolve. For the first time in nearly a year, the house felt like mine in every sense. The journey had been harsh, but it had taught me that boundaries are sacred, that persistence pays off, and that justice does not always have to be loud to be complete. The night after the birthday party, I sat alone in my living room, letting the silence wrap around me. The hum of the security cameras was a subtle reminder that my home was mine, safe and respected. I thought back to the months spent in my car, to the cold library mornings, to the constant pressure from family. Each step, each hardship had led me here to a place of peace I had earned. I realized that strength often grows in quiet ways. Standing firm, documenting every intrusion, setting boundaries, and trusting my own judgment had created a foundation stronger than any argument or confrontation could. Empowerment, I learned, comes from preparation and persistence, not from fighting louder than others. If you've ever had to defend your choices, even when those closest to you question them, I hope you remember this. Boundaries are not selfish, and self-respect is a reward worth every effort. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one applauds but yourself. Have you ever had to quietly stand your ground against pressure from people who should have supported you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments.